Undercover CEO saw a poor black waitress cleaning her son's shirt in a restroom. What happened next? The fluorescent lights in the staff restroom flickered with that annoying buzz that Samuel Rodriguez had somehow managed to ignore for the past 3 weeks. Funny how quickly you adapt to things, he thought, pushing through the heavy door with his shoulder while wiping his hands on the dish rag tucked into his apron strings. 3 weeks ago, the idea of him, CEO of Martinez Restaurant Group, owner of 47 locations across the Southwest, scrubbing plates in the back kitchen of his own flagship restaurant would have been laughable. But here he was, going by. Sam the dishwasher. Complete with scuffed work boots, a faded uniform 2 sizes too big, and hands that now bore the permanent prune texture of someone who spent 8 hours a day elbow deep in soapy water. The idea had come to him during a board meeting where profit margins looked beautiful on paper, but customer complaints were climbing. Maybe we need to get back to basics, his CFO had suggested. Remember what made us successful? Sam had nodded along, but something deeper was eating at him. When was the last time he'd actually walked through one of his restaurants? Really walked through it, not the sanitized grand tours where everything was polished and staged. That's when the crazy idea hit him. What if he went undercover? What if he worked alongside his employees, saw what they saw, felt what they felt? His assistant had thought he'd lost his mind. His wife had laughed until she realized he was serious, then spent 2 hours trying to talk him out of it. But Sam had made up his mind. Now, 3 weeks into his experiment, he was beginning to understand why his wife had been so concerned. This wasn't the adventure he'd imagined. His back ached constantly from hunching over industrial sinks. His feet burned from standing on concrete floors for 10 hours straight. And the pay? God, the pay was insulting when you actually had to live on it. Sam pushed open the restroom door, already thinking about the 15-minute break he'd earned. Maybe he could sit down, maybe grab a quick coffee from the machine that served liquid that only technically qualified as coffee. But the moment he stepped inside, he froze. There, at the bank of sinks, stood Marla. He knew her, of course. Had watched her for weeks now, moving through the dining room with the kind of efficient grace that only comes from years of experience. She was one of those employees you notice, not because she caused problems, but because she never did. Orders were always right, customers left happy, and she somehow managed to make even the most demanding diners feel like they were her only table. But seeing her here, in the harsh light of the staff restroom, Sam realized he'd never really seen her at all. Marla was bent over one of the sinks, her uniform, which Sam now noticed was faded from too many washings, the fabric thin enough to show the outline of her undershirt, rolled up at the sleeves. In her hands was a small white shirt, child-sized, and she was scrubbing it gently but thoroughly with hand soap from the dispenser. Standing beside her, shifting his weight from foot to foot in that universal posture of childhood embarrassment, was a boy Sam guessed to be about 8 years old. The kid had Marla's eyes, the same warm brown that seemed to take in everything, and he clutched a worn backpack against his chest like a shield. Sam's first instinct was to back out quietly. This felt private, intimate in a way that made him uncomfortable. But something about the scene held him frozen just inside the doorway, hidden partly behind the door frame. "Hold still, baby," Marla was saying, her voice carrying that particular tone mothers use when they're trying to fix something that can't really be fixed. "We're almost done." The boy, her son obviously, looked up at her with those big eyes that seemed too serious for his age. "Mom, it's okay. I can just wear it wet. Nobody's gonna notice." "Oh, they'll notice," Marla replied, wringing out the shirt with careful hands. "And you're not going to school looking anything less than perfect." "Not my baby." Sam watched as she held the shirt up to the light, checking for any remaining stains. Whatever had happened to it, juice, food, the inevitable disasters of childhood, she'd managed to get most of it out. But the shirt itself told a story that no amount of scrubbing could hide. It was thin from washing, the collar slightly frayed, and Sam could see where it had been mended at the elbow with thread that didn't quite match. "This has to last, baby," Marla continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "We can't get another one till next term." The words hit Sam like a physical blow. Next term. That was months away. This child, this bright-eyed boy who was trying so hard to be brave for his mother, was going to wear this same shirt, this one white school shirt, for months. Sam felt something cold settle in his stomach as the full weight of what he was witnessing sank in. He'd been playing at being poor for 3 weeks, knowing that at any moment he could walk away, go home to his house with its walk-in closets full of clothes, his wife who complained about having nothing to wear, while standing in front of hundreds of options. But for Marla, this wasn't a game. This was life. She was pressing the shirt between paper towels now, trying to absorb as much moisture as possible. Her movements were practiced, efficient. This wasn't the first time she'd done this, Sam realized. How many times had she stood in the same spot, in this harsh fluorescent light, trying to make the impossible work? There, she said finally, shaking out the shirt and holding it up. It was still damp, but wearable. Good as new. The boy took it from her, his small fingers careful not to wrinkle it. Thanks, Mom. Marla knelt down then, bringing herself to eye level with her son, and Sam saw her face fully for the first time since he'd entered. She looked tired, not just end-of-shift tired, but bone-deep exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there in the employee photo in her file, and her hands, as she smoothed down his hair, were rough and red from constant work. But when she looked at her son, her entire face transformed. The exhaustion was still there, but it was overshadowed by something else, a fierce, protective love that made Sam's chest tight. You remember what I told you about Mrs. Patterson next door? She asked, straightening his collar with gentle fingers. The boy nodded. She's waiting for me outside. And I do my homework first thing when I get there. That's right. And what else? And I help her with anything she needs, because she's being nice letting me stay there till you get home. Marla pulled him into a hug then, and Sam saw her close her eyes, holding on just a second longer than necessary. When she let go, she was smiling, but Sam caught the quick swipe she made at her eyes. I love you to the moon and back, she said, the words carrying the weight of ritual, of something said every day. And around all the stars, the boy finished, grinning now. I love you too, Mom. Sam watched as Marla walked her son to the door, her hand protectively on his shoulder. She cracked it open, peering out to make sure the coast was clear. Bringing your child to work was probably against company policy, Sam realized with a sick feeling, before ushering him out. The lunch rush hit like a tornado, and Sam found himself grateful for the mindless rhythm of scraping plates and loading the industrial dishwasher. Spray, scrape, load, repeat. The repetitive work gave his hands something to do while his mind wrestled with what he'd witnessed in the restroom. Every time he glanced through the kitchen's pass-through window into the dining room, he caught glimpses of Marla weaving between tables with practiced grace. She moved differently than the other servers, more purposeful, more careful. Sam began to notice things he'd missed before, how she double-checked every order before leaving the kitchen, how she anticipated customer needs before they even asked, how she somehow managed to make each table feel like they were her priority. Order up, called Miguel, the head cook, sliding 2 plates across the steel counter. Sam watched as Marla appeared instantly, balancing the plates with the kind of skill that took years to develop. But as she turned toward the dining room, he heard something that made him pause mid-scrape. Table 12 wants extra sauce, she murmured to herself, so quietly he almost missed it. And Table 7's little girl will need crayons in about 5 minutes when she gets bored. She wasn't just serving food, she was managing an entire ecosystem of human needs and wants, tracking dozens of details that would make or break someone's dining experience. And she was doing it all while worrying about whether her son's shirt would dry properly before school tomorrow. The lunch rush finally slowed around 2 o'clock, and Sam found himself lingering near the coffee station during his break. The dining room had mostly cleared out, leaving just a few stragglers and the afternoon shift getting ready to take over. That's when he saw Marla slip back toward the restroom area, moving with the kind of careful stealth that suggested she didn't want to be noticed. Sam hesitated for a moment, then followed at a distance. Something about her posture, the way her shoulders were set, the slight tremor in her hands as she pushed through the door, told him this wasn't a routine bathroom break. He stopped just outside the restroom door, not quite willing to eavesdrop but unable to walk away. Through the thin walls, he could hear Marla's voice, muffled but audible. She was on the phone. "Hey, baby," she was saying, and Sam realized she must be calling her son at the neighbor's house. "How was school? Did your shirt dry okay?" There was a pause, and Sam could imagine the boy's response on the other end. "Good, good. That's my smart boy." Her voice carried a smile, but Sam could hear something else underneath it, exhaustion that went bone deep. "Listen, honey, I need you to be extra good for Mrs. Patterson today, okay? Mommy's got to work a double shift again." Another pause, longer this time. "I know, baby. I know I promised we'd go to the park today. But Mr. Henderson called in sick again, and they need me to cover his tables." Marla's voice was getting softer, more strained. "We need the money, you understand? That extra shift means we can maybe get you those new shoes you need before they start hurting your feet too much." Sam felt his chest tighten. He thought about his own son's shoe closet, rows of sneakers, dress shoes, cleats for various sports Marcus played but wasn't particularly passionate about. Shoes that cost more than Marla probably made in a week. "What's that?" Marla was saying. "Your math homework? Okay, you can do it at Mrs. Patterson's kitchen table, and I'll check it when I get home tonight. It'll be late, but I'll check it, I promise." There was another pause, and when Marla spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Baby, listen to me. I know this is hard. I know you want me home more, and I want that too. More than anything in this world." Sam heard what sounded like a quiet sob being swallowed. "But Mommy's doing this for us, okay? Everything I do is for us. This has to last, baby. This job, all of it has to last until something better comes along." The words echoed what Sam had heard her say about the shirt. This has to last. And suddenly he understood. It wasn't just about the shirt. It was about everything. The job that barely paid enough to survive on. The apartment they probably couldn't really afford. The careful budgeting that meant one school's shirt had to last an entire semester. The double shifts that kept her away from her son but were necessary to keep food on the table. Everything in Marla's life was about making things last until something better came along. And what if nothing better ever came? "I love you to the moon and back," Marla said, and Sam could hear her trying to inject some lightness back into her voice. "And around all the stars," came the faint reply from the phone's speaker, and Sam realized the boy was trying just as hard to sound cheerful for his mother's sake. After she hung up, Sam heard silence. Then, very quietly, the sound of someone crying. He stood frozen outside the door, feeling like an intruder but unable to move. This wasn't his pain, wasn't his struggle, but somehow it felt like it was cutting right through him. How many of his employees were having conversations like this? How many were working doubles not because they wanted extra money for vacations or luxuries, but because they needed it to buy their children shoes? When Marla finally emerged from the restroom, her face was composed again, professional. She'd wiped away any trace of tears and retied her apron with military precision. But Sam caught the slight redness around her eyes, the way she held her shoulders just a little too straight. She saw him standing there and paused. "You okay?" she asked, and Sam realized he must look as shaken as he felt. "Yeah," he managed. "Just tired, I guess." Marla studied his face for a moment, and Sam had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see right through him. Then she smiled. That same smile he'd seen her give to difficult customers, the one that somehow made everything seem manageable. "You know what helps when I'm tired?" she said. "Remembering why I'm doing this. Makes the rest easier to bear." She patted his shoulder gently, the way she might comfort her son, and headed back toward the dining room. Sam watched her go, marveling at her resilience, her ability to compartmentalize her pain and show up fully for everyone who needed her. But as the door swung closed behind her, Sam was left with the echo of her whispered words. "This has to last, baby. We can't get another one till next term." And suddenly, Sam knew exactly what his next step had to be. Sam had always prided himself on being good with people, but 3 weeks of washing dishes had taught him something new. Invisible people see everything, and they talk to each other. As Sam the dishwasher, he'd become part of the restaurant's invisible workforce. The people customers looked through, the ones management barely acknowledged. But these invisible people had their own network, their own conversations, their own truths about what really went on behind the polished facade of Martinez Restaurant Group's flagship location. It started with Carlos, the prep cook who worked the morning shift alongside Sam. "You seem different today, hermano," Carlos said on Tuesday morning, dicing onions with mechanical precision. "Something on your mind?" Sam kept his hands busy loading the dishwasher, trying to appear casual. "Just wondering about some of the other staff. Like Marla. She seems to work a lot of hours." Carlos snorted, a sound without humor. "Work a lot? Man, that woman lives here. Double shifts, sometimes triples when someone calls in sick. Which happens a lot, you know. Hard to stay healthy when you can't afford to see a doctor. She's been here long? For years, maybe 5? Started part-time when her kid was smaller, but her ex stopped paying child support, so..." Carlos shrugged, the gesture saying more than words could. "Now she takes any shift they'll give her. Weekend nights, holidays, you name it." Sam felt that familiar knot tightening in his stomach. "The company treats her well, though, right? I mean, someone who's been here that long." Carlos stopped chopping and looked at Sam directly. "You really are new, aren't you?" There was something almost pitying in his expression. "Marla makes $8.50 an hour, same as most of the servers. Tips help, but they cut her hours last year, everybody's hours, to keep us all under 30 hours a week. Why would they do that? Benefits, man. If you work less than 30 hours, they don't have to offer health insurance, paid sick days, any of that." Carlos resumed his chopping, the knife hitting the board with sharp, angry strokes. "So instead of having 20 full-time employees with benefits, they have 30 part-time employees who get nothing." The information hit Sam like a physical blow. He'd signed off on that policy change himself, sitting in his air-conditioned boardroom while the HR director explained how it would optimize labor costs and increase operational flexibility. The numbers had looked so clean on paper. The human cost had never entered the equation. "That can't be legal," Sam said weakly. "It's legal," Carlos replied. "Just not right. But who's gonna complain? You complain, suddenly your shifts get cut even more. Or you get written up for being 2 minutes late. Or your schedule changes every week so you can't get a second job." He scraped the onions into a container with more force than necessary. "They got it all figured out, these corporate types." Over the next few days, Sam made it his mission to have similar conversations with other staff members. Each conversation revealed another piece of a picture that was becoming increasingly horrifying. From Janet, the morning hostess. "I've been asking for a raise for 2 years. They keep saying the company's reviewing all positions, but nothing ever changes. Meanwhile, rent goes up, groceries cost more, but my paycheck stays exactly the same." From David, the evening bartender. "You know what's funny? I have a college degree. Business management, actually. But this job pays more than anything else I can find, and even then I'm sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other guys just to make rent." From Rosa, who cleaned the dining room. "My daughter needs glasses. The school nurse says she can't see the board properly. But the cheap frames at the Vision Center still cost more than I make in a week. So she squints and pretends she's fine." Each story was a punch to the gut, but Sam forced himself to listen, to remember every detail. These weren't just employees. They were people with families, dreams, needs that weren't being met despite working full-time jobs at a company that was posting record profits. By Thursday, Sam felt like he was drowning in information. Back in his hotel room that night, the same 5-star hotel where he'd stayed countless times for business, now feeling obscenely luxurious, he spread his laptop across the king-size bed and accessed the company's confidential HR database. The numbers were even worse than he'd imagined. Marla Jenkins, hired 5 years ago at $7.25 per hour. Current wage, $8.50 per hour. Total raises over 5 years, $1.25. Hours per week, carefully maintained at 29.5 hours to avoid benefit eligibility. Sam did the math. Marla was making roughly $1,100 per month, before taxes. In a city where the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment was $1,200. He pulled up more files. Carlos Martinez, 6 years with the company, wage increases totaling $2. Janet Williams, 4 years, 3 total raises amounting to 75 cents. The pattern was consistent across dozens of employee records. But the most damning information was in the management notes. Comments like, "Employee requested additional hours denied to maintain part-time status," and "Sick day usage tracked, employee warned about attendance policy despite no actual policy violations." There were also notes about complaints that had apparently vanished into thin air. David had filed 3 formal complaints about scheduling irregularities that made it impossible to hold a second job. Rosa had requested a meeting with HR about workplace safety issues. Marla had asked twice about the possibility of advancement opportunities. Every single complaint had been marked, resolved, with no follow-up documentation. Sam leaned back against the hotel room's plush pillows, his laptop screen casting blue light across his face. The contrast wasn't lost on him. Here he was, in a room that cost more per night than some of his employees made in a week, reading about their struggles to afford basic necessities. He thought about the board meetings where they'd celebrated increased profit margins. The shareholders who'd been thrilled with the company's efficient labor management. The executives, himself included, who'd patted themselves on the back for maximizing returns. All of it built on the backs of people like Marla, washing her son's school shirt in a restaurant bathroom because they couldn't afford another one until next term. Sam closed the laptop and stared at the hotel room ceiling. Tomorrow, he would go back to washing dishes, listening to more stories, gathering more evidence. But tonight, for the first time since he'd started this undercover experiment, he felt like he truly understood what he was up against. This wasn't just about one restaurant, one manager, or even one policy. This was systemic, intentional, and it was happening at every location across his company, affecting thousands of employees who trusted Martinez Restaurant Group to treat them fairly. The question now was what he was going to do about it. By Friday morning, Sam had developed a new appreciation for the art of invisible listening. As he scrubbed pots and loaded dishes, he kept his ears tuned to the conversations happening around him, and what he heard made his blood run cold. It started with a conversation he overheard between Lisa, the assistant manager, and Tom, the floor supervisor. Sam was cleaning the big mixing bowls in the corner when they walked into the kitchen, speaking in low voices. "Did you process that overtime complaint from last week?" Lisa asked, checking something on her clipboard. "Which one? The thing with Marcus claiming he worked past 11 on Tuesday?" Tom's voice carried a dismissive edge. "That's the one. What did you put in the system?" "Clock malfunction. Said the system showed he clocked out at 11 sharp." Tom shrugged. "His word against the computer, right? And computers don't lie." Sam's hands stilled on the bowl he was scrubbing. Marcus was a server he'd chatted with a few times, a college kid trying to pay his way through school. Sam remembered him mentioning that he'd been staying late to help close on busy nights. "Good," Lisa replied. "Corporate's been breathing down my neck about overtime numbers. They want them under 5% of total labor hours." "No problem. I've been real creative with the scheduling software. Amazing how many system errors we can have when people try to clock in early or clock out late." They moved on, but Sam felt sick. He'd just witnessed wage theft, plain and simple. And it was being coordinated by management, encouraged by corporate policy. The pieces started falling into place over the next few hours. During his break, Sam struck up a conversation with Angela, one of the prep cooks who'd been there for 3 years. "You ever file any complaints with HR?" Sam asked casually, sipping the terrible break room coffee. Angela laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Once. Big mistake. What happened? This was about 8 months ago. I was getting scheduled for crazy shifts, like closing Tuesday night then opening Wednesday morning, which meant I'd get home at midnight and have to be back at 6 a.m. Impossible to get enough sleep, you know? Angela stirred sugar into her coffee with more force than necessary. So I filled out one of those online complaint forms. And 2 days later, Lisa calls me into the office. Says there's been some confusion about my complaint, and would I mind explaining what I meant? So I told her about the scheduling, and she nods and takes notes, real sympathetic. Angela's expression darkened. Week after that, my hours got cut in half. Suddenly I'm only getting 2 shifts a week, and they're all the worst ones, Sunday mornings, Tuesday lunch when it's finished. Did you complain again? Are you kidding? I got the message loud and clear. Keep your mouth shut or find another job. Angela drained her coffee cup. Thing is, I can't afford to find another job. This one barely pays my bills as it is, but at least it's something. Sam felt like he was uncovering a conspiracy. After his shift ended, he decided to test something. He went to one of the public computers in the hotel business center and pulled up the employee portal for Martinez Restaurant Group. There it was, a bright, cheerful section titled Employee Feedback and Concerns, with an easy-to-use form for submitting complaints. He spent an hour reading through the portal's fine print. Buried deep in the terms of service was a clause that made his stomach turn. Management reserves the right to discuss any submitted concerns directly with the employee to ensure accurate understanding and appropriate resolution. In other words, there was no such thing as an anonymous complaint. Every concern, every grievance, every request for help was immediately flagged to the very managers who might be causing the problems. Sam closed the laptop and sat back in the hotel's plush business center chair. The system wasn't just broken, it was designed to be broken. Designed to discourage complaints, punish whistleblowers, and maintain a workforce too scared to speak up. Over the weekend, working his regular shifts, Sam started paying attention to different things. He watched servers wolf down food in the break room because they couldn't afford to buy lunch. He saw David, the bartender, quietly taking pain medication for a back injury he couldn't afford to have properly treated. He noticed how many employees wore the same uniforms day after day because they couldn't afford to have multiple sets cleaned. Most telling of all was what happened when people got sick. Maria, one of the hostesses, came to work on Saturday obviously fighting a fever because she couldn't afford to lose a day's pay. She spent her shift sniffling and trying not to cough on customers, clearly miserable but terrified of being written up for an unexcused absence. "You should go home," Sam told her during a quiet moment. "Can't," she replied, her voice hoarse. "Already used my 3 sick days this year, and it's only April. If I call in sick without having sick days left, it's an unexcused absence. 3 of those and you're fired. But you're actually sick. Doesn't matter. Policy is policy." She gave him a weak smile. "Besides, if I don't work, I don't eat. Simple as that." Sam watched her struggle through the rest of her shift, greeting customers with forced cheerfulness while clearly feeling awful. He thought about his own corporate sick leave policy, 2 weeks paid, plus the option to work from home when feeling under the weather. The contrast was staggering. By Sunday night, Sam had filled a notebook with observations, overheard conversations, and documented incidents. The picture that emerged was of a systematic network of suppression and exploitation. Employees were kept deliberately vulnerable, hours cut just below benefit thresholds, wages kept just low enough to ensure desperation, complaints routed directly to the people they complained about. Workers had learned to normalize skipping meals to save money, working while sick because they couldn't afford not to, and using tip money for groceries instead of anything resembling savings or emergency funds. They'd accepted that asking for basic fairness was a luxury they couldn't afford. As Sam lay in his hotel bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he realized he wasn't just investigating anymore. He was documenting evidence. Evidence of a system that was working exactly as designed to extract maximum profit from people who had no choice but to accept whatever scraps were offered. The question was no longer what was wrong with his company. The question was how deeply the rot had spread, and whether it was too late to cut it out without destroying everything. Monday's lunch rush arrived like a perfect storm. The hostess had called in sick, the real kind of sick, not the kind where you drag yourself to work anyway, and 2 servers hadn't shown up at all. Sam watched from the dish pit as Lisa scrambled to cover tables, her usual composed demeanor cracking under the pressure. "Marla!" Lisa barked across the kitchen. "You're taking sections 3 and 4 plus your regular tables." Sam looked up from the mountain of plates he was loading. That meant Marla would be handling nearly half the dining room by herself. During lunch rush. On a Monday when the restaurant was already understaffed. "No problem," Marla replied, tying her apron with practiced efficiency. She didn't complain, didn't argue, didn't even look fazed. She just grabbed her order pad and headed into what Sam knew would be absolute chaos. For the next 2 hours, Sam found himself stealing glances through the kitchen pass-through, watching Marla work. What he saw was nothing short of extraordinary. She moved through her expanded section like a conductor orchestrating a symphony. Table 6 needed extra napkins. She grabbed them while walking past, remembering their request from 10 minutes earlier. The family at table 12 was getting restless waiting for their appetizer. She appeared with breadsticks and coloring pages for the kids before they even thought to complain. The businessman at table 15 was clearly in a hurry. She'd already prioritized his order with the kitchen and had his check ready the moment he finished eating. But it was table 8 that really caught Sam's attention. A middle-aged couple had been seated there about 30 minutes into the rush. The man was already agitated when they sat down, red-faced, checking his watch repeatedly, speaking in the sharp tones of someone used to getting his way immediately. His wife looked embarrassed, trying to calm him down with quiet words and apologetic glances around the restaurant. Sam watched as Marla approached their table, notepad ready, professional smile in place despite the fact that she was clearly running on empty. She'd already been working for 6 straight hours, covering twice her normal section, but she greeted them like they were her first customers of the day. "Good afternoon. I'm so sorry for the wait. Can I start you folks off with some drinks?" The man didn't even look up from his menu. "About time. We've been sitting here forever. This is ridiculous. I want to speak to your manager." "I completely understand your frustration, sir," Marla replied, her voice steady and genuinely sympathetic. "It's been busier than usual today, and I take full responsibility for the delay. Let me get your manager, but first, can I bring you some complimentary appetizers while you wait? Our spinach and artichoke dip is excellent, and it'll be out in just a few minutes." The man finally looked up, his expression still sour but slightly less hostile. "Fine. And we want Diet Cokes. 2 of them. And make sure they're actually cold this time. Last place we went served us warm soda like we wouldn't notice." "Absolutely. Ice-cold Diet Cokes coming right up, and I'll make sure they're perfect." Marla's smile never wavered. "I'll be back with your drinks and that appetizer in just a moment." Sam watched her walk away, maintaining perfect posture despite the fact that he could see the exhaustion and the slight slump of her shoulders when she thought no one was looking. She got the drinks, spoke quietly with Lisa about the situation, then returned to the table with the appetizers and the manager in tow. But what happened next made Sam's chest tight with something between admiration and rage. The man launched into a tirade about poor service, how this generation didn't understand customer service, how he was never coming back. Lisa nodded and apologized, offering to comp their meal. Standard damage control. But then the man turned his attention back to Marla. "And you," he said, pointing directly at her. "You clearly don't know how to do your job. Maybe you should consider finding work you're actually qualified for. This isn't rocket science. Take orders, bring food. How hard is that?" Sam saw Marla's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained perfectly level. "You're absolutely right, sir. Good service should be seamless, and I fell short of that today. I sincerely apologize. Is there anything else I can do to make this right for you?" The grace of it, the way she absorbed his verbal abuse without flinching, The way she maintained her professionalism in the face of humiliation was breathtaking. This was a woman working multiple jobs to afford her son's school clothes, dealing with customers who treated her like she was disposable, all while keeping a smile on her face and genuine care in her voice. Sam thought about his own corporate dining experiences. The restaurants where he spent more on a single business lunch than Marla made in a week. The servers who fawned over him because they knew he was someone important. The automatic respect that came with his position, his clothes, his obvious wealth. Here was a woman showing more grace, more professionalism, more genuine skill than most executives he knew, and she was being berated by a customer who probably made more in a month than she'd see all year. The man eventually left, still grumbling, leaving behind a $2 tip on a $60 check. Sam watched Marla clear the table, her movements efficient but slightly slower than before. When she got to the kitchen, she leaned against the wall for just a moment, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. "You okay?" Sam found himself asking. Marla opened her eyes and gave him that same smile, tired but genuine. "Just another day in paradise," she said with a laugh that held no bitterness, only resignation. That night, back in his hotel room, Sam opened his laptop with hands that shook slightly with anger. He pulled up the company's executive compensation records, his own salary staring back at him from the screen. His annual bonus alone was more than what most of his employees made in 5 years. He thought about the board meetings, the shareholder reports, the profit margins they celebrated. All of it built on the backs of people like Marla, who absorbed abuse with grace, worked multiple sections without complaint, and went home to wash their children's clothes in restaurant bathrooms. Sam stared at his reflection in the laptop screen and made a decision that would change everything. By morning, he would have a plan. An internal audit, wage corrections, anonymous reporting channels that actually worked, and a hardship assistance fund. Real changes, systematic changes, changes that would cost the company millions but might restore some dignity to the people who made it all possible. He opened a new document and began typing, his fingers moving with the certainty of someone who had finally found his purpose. At the top of the page he wrote, "Operation Dignity, a complete restructuring of employee relations at Martinez Restaurant Group." And underneath that, underlined twice, "Marla is the reason we change." # the silent gesture. 2 weeks later, Sam Rodriguez walked through the front door of his flagship restaurant one last time as a dishwasher. He'd spent the past 14 days setting wheels in motion from his hotel room, making carefully worded phone calls to trusted executives, and laying the groundwork for changes that would ripple through every Martinez Restaurant Group location. But first, he had one final shift to complete. The restaurant felt different now, not because anything had physically changed, but because Sam saw it through completely new eyes. Every interaction, every policy, every moment of casual cruelty or unexpected kindness carried weight he never understood before. He found Marla in the break room during the morning prep, sitting alone with a cup of coffee and what looked like a stack of bills. She was using a calculator, writing numbers on the back of an envelope, her face wearing the concentrated expression of someone trying to make impossible math work. "Morning, Marla," Sam said, pouring himself coffee from the perpetually half-empty pot. "Oh, hey Sam." She looked up, quickly sliding the papers into her purse. "You're here early today." "Couldn't sleep," he said, which was true enough. "You okay? You look stressed." Marla laughed, but it came out hollow. "Just trying to figure out how to pay for my son's school pictures. They're $35, which sounds like nothing, but..." She shrugged, the gesture saying everything she couldn't. $35. Sam had spent more than that on coffee yesterday. The casual cruelty of it, a child missing out on school pictures because his mother couldn't spare $35, made Sam's chest ache. "I'm sure you'll figure it out," he said gently. "You always do." "Yeah," Marla replied, but her smile was tired. "I always do." Sam worked his shift in a haze of anticipation and nervousness. Everything he'd set in motion was scheduled to begin today. HR directors at every location had received identical sealed envelopes with explicit instructions not to open them until exactly 3 p.m. His own assistant, sworn to secrecy, had been working around the clock to verify employee records and calculate back pay owed. The hardest part had been staying in character, maintaining the fiction of Sam the dishwasher while orchestrating a company-wide revolution. But it was almost over. At 2:45 p.m., Sam made an excuse about feeling sick and clocked out early. He caught a taxi to the airport, where his private jet was waiting to take him back to corporate headquarters. He had a board meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow where he would explain exactly what had been happening in his restaurants and what he intended to do about it. But first, there was one more thing he needed to arrange. 3 days later, Marla was cleaning tables after the lunch rush when Lisa called her over to the hostess station. "You've got something in your locker," Lisa said, not looking up from her scheduling tablet. "Envelope or something?" Marla frowned. She never got anything in her locker except the occasional schedule change. But sure enough, when she opened the narrow metal door, there was a thick manila envelope with her name written across the front in neat handwriting. Inside the envelope were 3 items that would change her life forever. The first was a check, not her regular paycheck, but something from the corporate office. The amount made her sit down hard on the break room bench. $3,847.50. The memo line read, "Back pay adjustment for overtime and wage corrections." The second item was a letter on official Martinez Restaurant Group letterhead, informing her of an immediate wage increase to $15.50 per hour, effective immediately, along with qualification for full health benefits and paid sick leave. But it was the third item that made her cry. A certificate for a full academic scholarship to the local private school, covering tuition, books, uniforms, and all associated costs through graduation. The recipient line was filled out in the same neat handwriting. "For the son of Marla Jenkins, in recognition of exceptional dedication and character." At the bottom of the envelope was a folded piece of paper with a typed note. "Your dedication has not gone unnoticed. Your grace under pressure, your commitment to excellence, and your love for your family represent the very best of what this company should be. This is not charity, this is recognition of value that has always been there but was never properly acknowledged. Your son's future should never depend on whether you can afford school pictures or make a single shirt last an entire semester. You deserve better, and so does he." There was no signature, no name, just a simple line at the bottom. "With respect and admiration from someone who learned what leadership really means by watching you work." Marla sat in the break room, tears streaming down her face, clutching the scholarship certificate to her chest. She thought about all the double shifts, all the rude customers, all the nights she'd gone to bed wondering how she was going to make everything work. She thought about her son, who would now go to a school with small classes and resources she'd only dreamed of, who would have new uniforms and textbooks and opportunities she never imagined possible. She thought about the quiet dishwasher named Sam, who'd started working here a few weeks ago and had always been kind to her. She wondered if he knew anything about this, if somehow her small act of kindness toward a new employee had led to something bigger. But Sam was gone now. He'd called in sick 3 days ago and never came back. Probably found something better, like most people did eventually. Marla wiped her eyes and carefully folded the papers back into the envelope. She had tables to serve, customers to take care of, work to do. But for the first time in years, she walked back into the dining room knowing that her work had been seen, valued, and rewarded. She never suspected that the quiet, clumsy dishwasher who'd watched her wash her son's shirt in a restaurant bathroom had actually been the CEO of the entire company. And Samuel Rodriguez, watching the quarterly reports that showed improved employee satisfaction and decreased turnover across all locations, never forgot the lesson he'd learned from a woman who showed him what dignity looked like, even when the world seemed determined to take it away.